Good morning. Welcome to a tertiary world. This morning I'm reading some stories about Smith Street, the first north-south street that features in this remembering rendition of a walking performance through a grid of 14 streets in which I grew up. Smith Street is the first. Its colour is red. This is the fourth memory. Its colour is green. 232 Smith Street. I'm walking to school along Smith Street to St. Joseph's with an elderly Italian neighbour who accompanies his grandchildren to the same school. At such times, I miss my grandfather, who used to accompany me to my school in Trieste in much the same way. Missing him or missing anything is for me a new and extremely raw experience. Everything was the same and nothing ever changed in my life back in Trieste. Now it all hurts. One morning we come to the shoe shop at the corner of Otter Street, where we usually left after a pat on the head to run down to the school on our own. But this morning the elderly man calls out, "Filippo," to his grandson who's just about to cross the road. Filippo immediately obeys and comes to a halt. The old man turns to me and asks, "How would you say his name in English?" I think for an instant and then I reply, "Philip." He looks at me, then he asks, "And how do you spell that?" I reflect. "It starts with a PH. "How do you know that?" he asks, now obviously irritated. "Well, PH makes an F sound in English," I retort with conviction. I remember looking in the window at that instant and seeing my own reflection defined by the morning sunlight streaming up Otter Street. How do I know all that? Where does it come from? I try not to be bothered by it as I turn the corner and run into the sun. Filippo runs alongside me, smiling. Memory number 5, the colour is blue, the corner of Smith Street and Victoria Parade. One Saturday morning in the spring of 1956, I'm waiting on this corner with my mother, who's expecting a lift from Mr. Napoli, the chemist who has hired her as a sales assistant for his pharmacy in North Melbourne. He owns a jade green Ford Zephyr 6. It's a sunny morning and the leaves of the elms in Victoria Parade are sparkling brightly in a transparently blue light. Mr. Napoli is travelling westwards from North Bourne. Suddenly, there is the jade green Zephyr gliding under the warmer, dappled greenness of the elms in leaf. He slows down and for a moment the car vanishes in the shimmering shade of the trees. There it is again. My mother kisses me, waves and crosses to the other side. I watch her walk briskly to the waiting car that will deliver her to her first job in Australia. I look up at the leaves trembling in unison above me. When I look down again, I catch the last glint of jade disappearing into the tangle of trees and telegraph poles that line Victoria Parade all the way westward. Memory number 6145 Smith Street. St. Nicholas Day in December 1956. Smith Street is abuzz with Italian families buying toys for their children. Christmas Day doesn't signal an exchange of gifts for Italians, but is exclusively the day on which a religious feast is celebrated. December 6th is the day for gifts. My mother and I are walking along sunny Smith Street and we meet another Italian family. She stops to talk cheerfully with them. I think she intends to buy me a gift, but I cannot remember if she does or if I have imagined it. We walk past a local Coles store, painted a bright red, and we stop and stand in front of the very window where a few months before my parents and I, and many others, stood in hushed awe and watched the first TV broadcasts of the Melbourne Olympics, marathon runners streaming through the botanical gardens. I remember that it's my grandfather's birthday today. He's also named Nicholas. I wonder what he's doing right now in the late Trieste autumn. Probably sitting at his tailor's table, absorbed in needle and thread, sewing in wintry silence some wealthy man's shirt. Outside his window, the first few raindrops begin to fall from a leaden sky. Memory number 7, Violet, 325 Smith Street. For a number of years through the 90s, this was my favourite place to eat. It was called Thomas and was run by an elderly Greek man bearing this name and his wife. It was usually empty except for the times that someone or other would come in to either buy unlabelled bottles of Retsina or to eat alone. Thomas himself would labour away on a stove set behind the diners. He would often look up and smile benevolently into the room, irrespective of whether there was anyone there or not. He grilled the fish while his wife prepared the salads inside the tiny kitchen. He always seemed preoccupied with something other than the cooking. Old sepia prints of Salonika hung around the walls. Ancient trams moving along empty streets, about to enter a stone arch under heavy grey skies. A dusty city clustered around a hilltop. My favourite object in Thomas's Taverner was a large rectangular lightbox surrounded by an elaborate pine frame. It depicted the very long shorelines of an unnamed island, but was in fact made up of 2 versions of the same print, attached end to end. My mind kept trying to follow the shoreline from beginning to the end of the lightbox without being interrupted by the expert deception taking place somewhere in its centre. At times I could do it, and other times, no matter how hard I would concentrate, I would fail. On these occasions, Thomas would notice my interest and smile. "It's not real," he would warn me, smiling sadly from behind the counter. "Only illusion," he would say quietly, almost to himself, waving the index finger of his right hand from side to side in front of his chest, as his mouth turned over so slightly at the corners. I would nod and assure him that I knew. He was never convinced of this because he would repeat it to me whenever he could. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps he understood my weakness better than I understood it myself. Thomas Taverner has now long disappeared. In its place, another cafe has opened its doors. It's called Gestalt. Gestalt. Until tomorrow for the 2nd Street.